Hey everybody, this is Helena. I'm here with my husband Tom today.
Hey everyone.
After the last video I posted on how to show a man your value and convey that you'd be willing to walk away from the relationship without saying anything, I got a lot of comments under that video from women who are with a man who's not really prioritizing them or stepping up and committing. And the general question I got in those comments was, how do I make this man fear losing me? How do I get him to step up and start prioritizing me, basically? And I think that's a really great question that I get all the time, and it's very nuanced. So we wanted to do a whole live stream on that topic today and then get Tom's opinion, like I promised in that last video, on what to do if a man isn't prioritizing you. Is there something you can do to convey that you would be willing to walk away from that relationship? So I'll start by asking you, do you think it's necessary for a man to feel that he's afraid of losing a woman in order for him to truly commit to her?
Yeah, I actually do kind of think that that is necessary for commitment, but we should really clarify though, because I think what a man needs to feel is that he fears losing this perfect relationship. He has to feel a sense that this is the one and only relationship that he wants to be in, and that if something would go wrong there, he would never have this partnership again, basically. And it's not about anything that you could do to try to enforce that idea. I think it's just that he has to feel like the relationship has developed in a way that has convinced him that this is the person he wants to be with. And there should naturally be maybe a little bit of fear or concern when you don't have a committed relationship, that this is what you want to maintain, and that, you know, if that were to go away, you wouldn't be able to recover it. So I do think it's a little bit necessary.
I agree. I do think that the problem that the women are experiencing who ask questions like this is that the man they're dealing with is not afraid to lose her. He's taking her for granted. He gets the sense that he can kind of do whatever he wants and she's not going anywhere. He can come and go as he pleases because he's really got her and he's not afraid of losing her. But trying to apply tactics to make a man like that in that situation fear losing you is not the way to go, in our opinion. So like I mentioned, this is very nuanced, and we'll get into this as we talk more about that in this live stream. So was there ever a point in our relationship or when we were dating that you were afraid of losing me? And did that factor into you wanting to commit or prioritize me or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think surprisingly, I would say probably, yeah, that probably was actually the case at some point in our relationship. But it wasn't because of anything that you did. It was just because of the fact that I felt like we were so perfect. I really felt like we were soulmates by the point that we were a few months into our relationship and things were going really smoothly. And it just seemed obvious that this was headed toward commitment to me. So we did have a conversation, I think maybe that we had talked about in a prior video or a live stream years ago, but there was a point where we had a conversation about what kind of timelines we were on and what we were looking for. And I think you had mentioned to me that you were not interested in dating somebody continuously for years or something along those lines. And you were interested in having a family. And it was in that conversation that I think I really started to realize that, wow, I think this is it. Like, I think this is actually the relationship. This is who I want to be with. And so that did make me maybe feel a little bit like, oh, I don't want this to go away. I definitely want to make sure that I'm conveying that I'm interested in a commitment here. But again, it wasn't because of anything that you had specifically done to try to make me feel that way. It was just because we had such a great relationship at that point, I think. So I guess the natural question to follow that is just, was there a point where you felt like you needed to make me feel like I would fear losing the relationship? Did you ever feel like you needed to try to convey that to me?
That's a great question. Honestly, the answer is no. I talked a little bit about this in my last video. I'll include a link to that one as well as the one you just mentioned. I think it's called Say This to Tell a Man What You Want or What You're Looking For in a Relationship, because we go very in depth. It's like a whole 20-minute video on exactly what was said during that conversation. But yeah, really, you were prioritizing me. You were showing me that you were interested. It seemed as though we were on the same page. So I talked about this in my last video, that if you are at the point where you're trying to make a man fear losing you, most likely it's not the right situation, or you've gotten yourself to a point where you're doing so much and putting this man's needs ahead of your own to where he is taking you for granted. We can talk a little bit more about that at the end of this video, but I would never want you to be afraid to lose me. I don't feel that way now. I would never want you to feel that way because you don't deserve to feel that way. You're like the most amazing partner in the entire universe. So yeah, that thought didn't really cross my mind at all at any point. And I didn't think that that was necessary in order to make you commit because you were moving things forward. We did have that conversation because we've talked about this in your online dating profile. I said I was looking for a relationship and he said he wasn't sure yet.
Right.
So I always kind of had that in the back of my mind that he wasn't quite sure. I didn't know, like, did you see yourself getting married? Did you see yourself having a family at some point? And so that's why I brought up that conversation as early on as I did when we were dating, but it wasn't to make him fear losing me. It was more just, this is something I want. This is something I see for myself. So I'm going to convey that and not be attached to the outcome from a place of curiosity, see where you're at and see if we're on the same page before really investing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think it's probably fair to say that it's probably not an unhealthy thing that if you're not in a committed relationship yet, that you would maybe fear losing the relationship, but it's not a good thing if you're feeling like you need to make the other person fear losing you or losing the relationship. You shouldn't need to feel that way. You would want to eventually end up in a committed relationship, hopefully, if that's the objective. And in that case, you don't want to have that dynamic of fearing losing each other. It should be a stable, comfortable relationship. So what are some of the things that maybe a woman might do to try to make a man fear losing her that don't really work very well?
That's a great question. I think anything that looks like playing games, anything like making a guy jealous, ignoring his text messages or phone calls, waiting X amount of days to text him back to try to ignite him to chase her again, or anything like that, that just feels like a game or a strategy, or pretending to be cool, calm, and collected, pretending to have this full life when really you're doing that to try to affect him in some way. Even leaning back in a lot of ways can be coming from a masculine energy place. If you're doing that to try to make something happen with a man, that's the wrong way to go. It's the wrong approach. The only reason to lean back is simply because it doesn't feel good to focus on someone, on any man who's not showing up and pursuing you consistently. So anything that's trying to make a man feel a certain way or do something or make him fear losing you is never going to work because you just can't keep those things going forever. And a man can feel that, right? I think a man can really feel it in your energy and in your vibe if you're doing something to try to make him feel a certain way. And so if I had been doing any of those things, how would that have come across? Would you be able to tell? And how would that affect your feelings about me when we were dating?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think I would have been able to tell with you because it would have been incongruent with everything that I had come to know about you to that point. I mean, it was for none of those reasons that I felt like it was such a great relationship. I felt like it was such a great relationship because you were so calm and you knew what you wanted and you had conveyed your high value by just the way that you did everything. And it wasn't anything that you said or specifically did to try to make me feel a certain way. It was just who I had come to know over the course of our relationship. So I think if you had started trying to apply tactics or starting to tell me specific things to try to make me feel like I needed to commit or that I wasn't stepping up or something, it just would have been really, I think, off-putting because it wouldn't have even come across as you. I would have started to probably second guess if you were who I thought you even were. And at that stage of the relationship, that may have actually pushed me away, I think. So I don't think that would have been very effective.
So it sounds like what you're saying is just not necessary. If you're with the right person and he's truly interested, it's not necessary for you to apply any sort of tactic or say these perfect 9 words in the perfect order in order to ignite his desire to commit. He's going to want to do that all on his own. Of course, you can have conversations like the one we had about maybe 2 or so months into our relationship about, are we on the same page? And I think it's important to have those conversations before actually starting to invest, because I see a lot of women getting overly invested and then the man starts taking her for granted and then she doesn't know how to back herself out. That's when she starts asking questions like this. How do I make him fear losing me? So if you're in a situation where a man was pursuing you pretty strongly at the beginning, he was showing you that he was interested, and for some reason he's pulled away because maybe you've taken over some of that masculine energy role by always always being the one to move things forward, making things as easy as possible for him, always being the one to set up plans and drive to him and pay for the dates or anything like that. You're always the one to initiate contact or try to make things happen. If you're doing that and you've noticed the man has just naturally responded to that by leaning back, of course, you can reel it back in and see if he steps up again or not. That could look like authentically leaning back, truly focusing on yourself and your own life, and basically not throwing your energy out towards someone who's not doing the same in return. I talked a lot about this in my last video, so I'll include a link to that if anyone's interested in checking that out. Sticking to your standards and boundaries, not putting a man's feelings ahead of your own needs and desires. And I think another important point is really focusing on the relationship, not focusing on it like I need to focus on this relationship and figure it out, but put your desire for the relationship you want ahead or above your desire to be with any one particular man who's not stepping up right now. I say this a lot, but do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think evaluating the relationship rather than the specific person on the basis of anything that doesn't have to do with the relationship is really what you want to focus on to prevent yourself probably from becoming too invested at that stage. I think that if you can focus on the quality of the relationship, it'll really help in focusing your thoughts about this particular man as well. And yeah, I think that definitely helps in order to convey that, because if you feel like you're starting to get to this point where you're having to maybe reel it back in, you don't want to get to a point where you're kind of yo-yoing, where your energy's been going out and you start to draw back in, and maybe he starts to pursue you a little bit more, and then things start to reverse again and he starts to back away, so you start to reach back out again. It naturally should be where he is pursuing you. If he really feels that this is a valuable relationship and he really is interested in a commitment, he will do that. So pulling the energy back, if that's the mistake that's been made, will cause him to come forward, and he'll stay in that state. He won't start to back away again. That's a sign that there's something wrong, I think. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to kind of recap everything, when you're with the right person, you don't have to make him fear losing you in order for him to commit. He will naturally have that sort of sense that he wants to, I don't want to say lock you down into a commitment, but he doesn't want to lose you, right? And that just comes from who you are as a person. I was going to ask you, when you said you knew that we were soulmates and you kind of realized that really quickly, what was it that made you feel that way? From my perspective, it's like if you just show up as yourself without any armor or masks on, that's what allows the right person to see you and fall in love with you deep down. There's nothing you need to do in order to make a man feel that way about you, which is amazing because you can't keep those things going forever, those facades and games that we play. So do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it, but just to reiterate, I think that you can't keep that up. So even if you manage to be an outstanding actor and you can sort of convey this behavior for a while, it will eventually break down. And really, I think most men will see through those things pretty quickly anyway, because it really is true that who you are does come through eventually. And people are able to discern a false, I guess, front, because it just is incongruent. You have too many things that don't line up. And if somebody really conveys who they are naturally, that comes across really to anybody. And that is really who you want to have the man fall in love with, not some facade, obviously. Really, who you are authentically is what you want to focus on conveying in a relationship. And I think, as you mentioned in a prior video, anything about conveying that you're willing to walk away or anything like that is really going to come from the fact that you genuinely do feel like you could walk away, or you genuinely are conveying who you really are to the man, and he will naturally want to step up, and you won't have these questions of whether or not he fears losing the relationship or any sense that you want to make him fear losing the relationship. if he is simply just interested in maintaining this hopefully great relationship that the two of you have developed.
Yes, love that so much. I always love bringing Tom on. It's been a while. Our son is actually taking a nap right now. We're watching him on the video monitor, and so it's not quite as often as we can do these together, but we just have so much fun. I would love to bring you back on whenever it's possible. I think it's been like 3 years since we've done a live stream like this, but this was great. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk with you again soon.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Bye.